All right, guys, welcome to the Barbell Nerds podcast. I am Sean Fantuzzi and my co-host Will Rattel. We are happy to welcome Coach Dennis Kerstetter from Shippensburg University to our podcast today. Dennis, thanks for spending some time with us today.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I'm happy to be on and excited to have a conversation today.
Very cool, very cool. Tell our listeners a little bit about Coach K.
I am the head strength and conditioning coach at Shippensburg University, and I work with all of our sports there. We have 20 sports, and I have some way, shape, or form. I work with all of them, and what I mean by that is some of the sports don't necessarily elect to use the weight room, but they do some type of strength training outside of the weight room, I have a hand in all of that. Prior to Shippensburg, I was the first ever head strength coach at King's College, which is a Division III school up in northeastern Pennsylvania, and spent a year there before I was granted the opportunity to be at Shippensburg. And then prior to that, I had a couple of different stops at a couple of different Division I schools, mostly intern stuff, but then also a graduate assistantship at St. Francis, which is actually where I met you, Sean. So
I want to give a big shout out to Dennis just because he was my first intern ever. So that's why I'm just will forever hold it over your head. But obviously you're doing much cooler things now.
Yeah.
So,
but like at the end of the day, man, you were there at the start of it all.
At least I've had one successful intern.
Yeah.
Dude, that's pretty cool. So do you have interns right now, I guess?
Yeah.
How is that? Go ahead.
I call him a full-time assistant. He's not paid, but he is there full-time, and kind of worked out a deal for him. I have a pretty good relationship with a local prep school that is an all-boys prep school that actually houses him and feeds him. And from there, he's with me all day. And the only thing he has to do over at the prep school is he does some cleaning of some of their facilities every couple of nights, and then he's able to be housed and eat there. But then, in addition, with him, he has his own teams that I have him take over, and then we have 5 interns, so we have a staff of 7 for the most part.
That's interesting too, because, and this is just something I was thinking about the other night. The role of interns, it's probably, since you're at the D2 level, I'm not sure how interns apply from a staffing perspective. But like, I'm looking at it from an education standpoint of an intern, getting the hours that they would need for, like, let's say an SECC through the CSCCA, if they're not able to, like, this is a weird time to be an intern just because of being in the lockdown or like COVID restrictions of a lot of people being with their athletes or teams. Like head coaches of football teams, like if you have your director and then your 4 assistants, and then that's it. I don't know what schools are kind of allowing from a staffing perspective. Like, how are you approaching that with your teams having 7 people, if that's how many you have working with football or any of the other sports?
So, yeah, I mean, our interns aren't there all day, every day. We have set hours for them. There's a couple times in a week where I do have all hands on deck. And that's just based off their class schedules. So my interns are, every single one of them, except for one, is a Shippensburg student. And then, so they're through the exercise science program. But then the other one is a former Shippensburg student who also wanted to continue his education and kind of do some other stuff after he graduated, like right when I got there. So he didn't really have an opportunity, but then he had at least heard some great things, which was awesome. And he reached out and wanted to do a postgraduate internship with me. So so in terms of the interns that are students, they are basically following the same protocols as all the students on campus. So I'm not as worried about them in terms of like not as worried. That was a bad way of putting it. I'm less concerned about them because they have to follow the same guidelines as every student on campus in terms of code of conduct with the virus and how we're handling it on campus. And then my assistant, he has a little bit of a trickier issue to deal with, because while he does everything right, he has to worry about both campuses. So with the prep school, and even though he's not necessarily working with their athletes at the prep school, he's still on campus, and he's actually for all intents and purposes, an RA as well. He has to just kind of be there to help facilitate some things, and get guys kind of quieted down at certain hours and that type of stuff. But
a loaded schedule.
So what's that?
That's a loaded schedule, I said.
Yeah. I'm side note, I'm working my tail off to try to get him some money, or at least a GA out of this whole deal. He's done an awesome job, and I'm like, the least I can do is just, I'm going to work my tail off and try to get you something out of this entire ordeal. But anyway, so in terms of what we're doing, it's never really, there's not that many times that it's all hands on deck, but when it is all hands on deck, I mean, we're masked at all times. The way we have set up our program and also our space, we are socially distant at all times. The only time that we allow for not socially distant work is spotting, and just for player safety. But everything else that we're doing is from a socially distant standpoint, and it's just how I had to develop our schedule or our program to allow for us to at least train. Now, we're the only PSAC school that I'm aware of that's fully training right now.
Oh, wow. Congrats. That's great.
Yeah, it's awesome. Other schools have training, but they have to so I know Millersville, I have a pretty good relationship with Coach Regensburg at Millersville, and he is only allowed to train in groups of 8. So 8 students at a time, and that's it. Yeah.
And that's football too, right?
That's every sport. Just 8 people at a time. And I'm like, man, I don't even want to know what your schedule looks like.
Yeah, that's got to be back to back to back to back. And holy shit.
Gross.
Yeah, and I know me and him have a similar programming style in terms of where we kind of derive from and the things that we kind of hold at a high standard in terms of and within our programming. And I know for a fact what he used to do under normal circumstances can't be done the same way with these new regulations and stuff that he has to follow. But I'm really proud of the fact that we were able to kind of figure out a way and a system at our university to do this, because I just don't want to imagine a day that I would have to train just groups of 8 unless I was just a basketball only guy or a volleyball only guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. Well, because we've talked to guys on this podcast before who are one sport strength and conditioning coaches. And then we also talked to Austin Yoakum, who is he's at a Division III school in Minneapolis, and I think he said he's the only full-time on staff.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't make anything mandatory there off-season wise, training wise. Nothing can be mandatory, and I think there's not an athlete only weight room there, so he shares it with the general pop. And so it's just interesting. So I'm at UND. Sean used to be at UND. It's a mid-major small Division I school where we have a staff of 5. Yeah, staff of 5. And then we always have 1 or 2 interns. So we have a big enough staff to work with the sports we have. So it's so interesting, the spectrum, the wide range of situations people have to work within. So I think the biggest question for you is when you're the head guy working with 20 teams, you got 20 teams on campus. And do you only have one weight room as well at your school?
So we have our own athletics weight room, and then we have a rec center for general student body.
So football, basketball, track and field, they're all sharing the athletics only with, I don't know how many racks you have, maybe 8, 16, whatever it is. It's like, how do you go about scheduling teams and making sure you're keeping every sport coach relatively happy with the time slot that they have? Like, what is all of the logistics that go into that look like for you?
I will give credit to Coach Robert Day. He's the head guy at RMU, and he was the first ever strength coach at Shippensburg, and he was here 3 years ago. He laid the groundwork in terms of creating a schedule and kind of getting the coaches used to certain scheduling patterns and how they're going to do things. So he at least had the coaches to an understanding of the time frame to work with and where it falls within practice blocks and that type of stuff. And then so I just kind of took that and we just expanded upon it. And so we made things. I prioritize mostly in season first. If you're in season, you're going to get the first opportunity, just because you have so many other things going on that whatever time you have dedicated to the weight room, we're going to make sure that you have that time. And then beyond that, I kind of also prioritize our top tier teams. So our teams that are bringing in some revenue to the university. So that's our football and our basketballs. And then everyone kind of falls in between. And realistically, like I was kind of alluding to earlier, we have some teams that they just kind of want a really bare bones minimum. Just like our cross country team, our coach, he's into strength training, but a very different kind of strength training that he realistically just wants to have input, and he'll just run it himself. And so, I hate to say it this way, but it's no sweat off my back. It's just one less group that I don't have to necessarily fit into our time frames. And then track and field kind of falls at the same time every single day and every single year, because they don't want to lift before they sprint. They don't want to go lift before they jump. So they always come in after their practice block. So they're kind of track and field in general is figured out just based off of just the nature of their coaches and how they want to run things. And no other team wants to lift at 5:00 in the evening. So it kind of allows for me the rest of the morning. And then from there, it's just looking at what's going to work, how many they want. And we are lucky enough. So under normal circumstances, like I can put our volleyball team with our men's basketball team in our weight room. We have enough space to manage both of them and have them running. And now that I've developed the staff, like I can have me working with our volleyball team and my assistant working with our basketball team at the same time. And if there is any adjustments that need to be made to the program just for that day because of logistical issues in the weight room, we just make it on the fly and we figured out, we got it down and just change it and move on from there. And it's kind of forced me to be a little bit creative, more creative than I would have had to have been at Temple when I was there, because Temple, I had everything at my disposal. Not me, but the head strength coach had everything there, and whatever stuff he gave me, I knew I had massive amount of space in our football weight room, and but one of the biggest blessings I think I had was when I was at Kings prior to Shippensburg. I was under that same exact demands as the coach you were mentioning prior, who's in Minnesota. And you said Minnesota, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So at Kings, we have one weight room for the entire university. I was the first ever strength coach there, and D3 regulations is off season is there's no mandatory training. So that really, really taught me how to make things work with very little and not a lot of space. And I really think that's one of the biggest reasons why I got hired for this job, is that I did what I did, and I did it at a pretty high level at a Division III school that had very little. So they gave me a little bit more resources, a little bit more funding, a little bit more things here. And it kind of, their hopes are when they're looking at it from an administrative level, if you did it with so little, then hopefully you can do a lot more with a little bit more, you know? So, but at the end of the day, it's just about making sure the coaches are happy, you know, and making sure that they all have their needs met. And that's just a constant conversation. And sometimes we'll start the semester training 3 times a week. And then all of a sudden, like football, like our football coach I want to start 3 times a week. And then in the spring, all of a sudden he threw a 4th day. He's like, hey, do you have space for a 4th day? And I'm like, let me see what I can do, you know, and let me see if I can shift things around. Let me see if I can talk to some of the other coaches. And cause like at the time he was asking me, some of our spring sports are starting up. So they're going to drop back from 3 days of training down to 2 days of training and whatever the case may be. So it just opens things up, and just trying to, you know, you can't please everyone, and going into it, knowing that I can't say yes to everyone. Cause if I say yes to everyone, it's never going to work, you know, but that's my priority list. In season first, and then the next thing I prioritize is our teams that bring in some money, some revenue to the program, and then from there, kind of letting everything else filter in between is probably the biggest guiding light in terms of how I do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like so with my position, and Sean experienced this as well at UND. Like we'll have teams early in the morning in one weight room. We have three athletic only weight rooms at UND. And so sometimes I almost feel a little bit overwhelmed going across campus 3 or 4 times a day for different teams. But like hearing the kind of stuff that you deal with, I'm not envious of what you have to deal with, because it makes my job seem like so soft and so easy. Like I know fitting in my teams is not hard, because we have a big enough staff. We don't have that many sports, and it's like I have my 3 main teams, and then I assist with football, and I know where I'm going to be at all times. And I never really get to a point where like there's some conflict that I have to resolve. So yeah, like I commend you for like what you do. Like that's awesome that you're able to keep the ball rolling at all times and adjust on the fly like that.
To add on to that, I don't envy your position at all, Dennis.
Well, I mean, I appreciate it, but I think if you look at my position versus your position, Will, and Sean, whenever you were there, like there are trade-offs. You know what I mean? Like while you might be you might not envy that I have to, like there are things that you have to deal with that I do not envy in whatsoever. Like you're kind of, because you have 3 teams, you have a little bit more of a direct relationship with the coaches that you work with, which is sometimes a great thing, but can also be a really, really bad thing if you guys don't see eye to eye on certain things. And I'm really lucky. A lot of my coaches we have open lines of communication with all my coaches, but sometimes I think when you're in that role of having just a couple teams, you feel like they're your boss too, like the head coach of that team, a little bit of your boss. Not as they might not write your paycheck, but they kind of really direct which way you want to go, because at the end of the day, the university is going to look to make that coach happy versus making the strength coach happy. So there are definitely trade-offs on both ends, I think.
Yeah, that was, I mean, I know, Will, our team's differed a little bit because I worked with soccer as opposed to volleyball and tennis, but like I was the only strength coach that had to go to 3 different weight rooms. All 3, like I trained football, trained basketball, trained women's soccer. All 3 were in different weight rooms around campus. Thankfully, basketball and soccer were at least in the same walking vicinity.
Sort of in the same building, kind of.
Sort of. They're connected by like this random hockey arena, or I guess it's a practice hockey arena. But even so, I know. So changing the subject. I know you, Dennis, have just got a new weight room at the beginning of the quarantine, right?
Yeah, we got like 7 weeks of use out of it before COVID. took over.
And then now you kind of had to or forced to expand into a couple extra rooms as well, right?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that process of like getting a new weight room and then having to expand it.
Yeah, so I think one of the positives, the silver lining of this whole thing has been. Hang on one second, sorry.
All good.
His kids in the background, my dog in the background.
Yeah. I got my wife
happens.
over here. She's eating mac and cheese balls. So, Dennis, my wife says hi, by the way.
You're good.
Maggie says hi, Dennis.
So what's up, Meg?
What's up, Mag? Continue. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So one of the silver linings that came out of this is, we had like a lot of unused space, and that unused space was in the form of really old racquetball courts. So I was able to at least pitch to some of the higher ups of the university and within our program or within our department that if we're going to do this and we're going to do this the right way in terms of socially distant and all of these things, that we're going to need more space for me to be able to train at a high level and not have to have tiny groups going. So we actually were able to secure our weight room has 6 double-sided racks in it, a 30-yard strip of turf, and it's 5,000 square foot space, and it's all wide open. And then bless you. And then the racquetball courts, we end up getting 6 additional racks, half racks. So now I have at my disposal 18 racks that I can use. And it was, when you say forced, like it was more of me it was my driving effort that like I was the one, like I was like, we need this. And now what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to force the issue and being like, okay, because right now, if you look at it, it looks like a garage gym in our racquetball courts. It is plywood with some horse stall mat on top of it for our platforms. And then we have the racks. But it's awesome. It gives me a lot more space to train. So now my job is to make that so valuable that our administration wants to invest money and get us some new flooring and actually like spruce that place up and add some weights and do some things in that space. But I'm really hoping that we can get that moving, just because that would allow for multiple teams to train at once, no matter the size. You know, like we could have basketball in the racquetball area, and then we could have football going at a football group going at the exact same time. Because now, hopefully, when we get back to normal, the new normal, that we don't have to worry about space issues and being socially distant. So I can pack a little bit more people back into the weight room, and I can pack more people into our racquetball spaces, so we can actually get some multiple teams going, and it can actually help with our scheduling now because we'll have multiple spaces to utilize.
Very cool.
Well, kind of to move on to another subject here. So with you and your position and at the school you work with, can you tell us a little bit about like the administrative side that you probably have to deal with? Because like I said, at UND, like we're just strength and conditioning coaches. We have like our director of strength and conditioning has some administrative duties, but we don't have to deal with any of that. And with you at your position, working with so many teams, and you just have some interns underneath you, what is that? Because you're going to have different hats. You can't just be the strength and conditioning coach for a couple teams. You got to work with so many different people in so many different situations and contexts. Like what does that look like outside of the training part?
Yeah, I wish some days I wish that I could be just a strength coach again. You know what I mean? Like when I was an intern and a GA, like I never, now looking back on it, like I don't envy Coach Weber at St. Francis and get to deal with the St. Francis and like Coach Feely when I was with him at Temple, because now I know at my level, and this is a Division II level, where the wins and losses don't really dictate that much in terms of whether or not you have a job next year. You know what I mean? But some of the administrative stuff that I deal with is less what most people would deem as administrative stuff. Like, it's not really paperwork. It's more or less like the additional things that I'm involved in to be seen as a productive member on our campus. So I'm involved in a couple initiatives that we have on campus. One of it is a One Ship initiatives, which is an anti-racist, anti-bias group that is trying to change the model of how we're doing things in terms of, and just creating equity across the board. So like I'm involved in that. I'm involved in our student athlete welfare group. So like talking about how we're going to keep the mental health aspect high in our within our athletics department, and what we need to do to kind of facilitate for our athletes in terms of if they need something and it's a mental health issue, how we're going to facilitate that. Myself and one of our athletic trainers is the main source of nutrition help in terms of, for all of our athletes, if they need nutrition help, it's really just us two that are providing all of that information. So it's it's less what I would deem as administrative stuff, because I don't really deal with a lot of the paperwork aspect of it, because a lot of that runs through my direct boss, who is our associate athletic director. But it's more of just the multiple hats that they have to wear to kind of show a complete, whole, rounded person at Shippensburg, and not be looked at as only the strength coach. Because while in my head and the way I want to do things, I'd love to be just a strength coach, but I know that when it comes to being for lack of a better way of putting it, valued on campus, I got to show that I'm putting my foot forward in other areas. Not that it's things that I don't want to do. Like, I want to do these things, and I want to be involved in these things, and I care about these things. I care about our student athletes' mental health. I care about their well-being, what they're doing, and I care about them holistically. But I can show them that. The only people that need to know that I care about them is my student athletes. If my student athletes and my coaches know that I care about our student athletes, I can do that in the weight room, and I can do that with the time that I spend with them on the field, in the weight room, all the other things that we do. But the other people on campus, they don't necessarily see that as me caring. They're thinking that that's me doing my meathead thing and picking things up and putting them down, and not knowing that we talk about life issues. I have really in-depth conversations with some of our student athletes about what's going on at home and what they're doing. And you guys know this because you guys all have relationships with your athletes, and the people you work with. But if someone would come into the weight room and hear some of the things that we talk about, they'd be like, aren't you just the trainer? Like,
the weights guy. Yeah.
I'm not a trainer. I'm a strength coach, but yeah. So it's the administrative side of it's less paperworky as some people would think. Like, that's what I thought administrative meant when I was a GA. It was like, oh, I just have to do like some of the paperwork stuff. It's less about that. And I think one additional thing that kind of comes online is now I got to deal with like one of the paperwork things that I have to deal with that's a burden some days is like I have to deal with all of our injury reports and looking at like across all of our teams. Like, okay, this person can't do this. How do we modify? This person can't do this. How do we modify? And every morning that's like a part of that's like 15 minutes in my morning run through of what we're doing for the day of, all right, like this intern, like your focus is so-and-so because they're returning from play. They finally got cleared. Their post-op ACL, like this is what you have to do with them. This is how we're modifying the lift. This is what we're doing with them. So dealing with all of that in terms of our athletic training and sports med staff is sometimes daunting, but I have a great relationship with them, and they trust what we do in the weight room more than what the previous strength coach did. Not Coach Day, but there's a gentleman in between, and there was some bad blood and not, I guess bad blood's about wrong, but there just was conflicting thought processes on how to do things when it comes to return to play and dealing with injuries. And when I came in, my biggest thing is I want to train when they're injured, but I'm going to train in the best way possible to help them recover from injury, but not have a chance of hurting them again. And they would ask me how I'm going to do this and how I'm going to do that. And if so-and-so had this, how would you do this, and doing that, and kind of going through that process. And I built a high level of trust from them. And it's really helped with dealing with some of those injuries, because now it's not necessarily driven from sports med of what I can and can't do. It's kind of become on me in terms of what I can and can't do in the weight room, but it's just guided from them. So just restricted overhead on the left side with this person, or restricted like knee bending, like because they have patella tendonitis or whatever the case may be with this person, or whatever the case may be. So that administrative stuff has been a little daunting from time to time, just going through the injury reports and just making sure I have my head on straight after looking at all 20 teams. Even if 20 teams have one person who's injured, that's 20 people I have to try and figure out and modify for.
Awesome. Hey, yeah, well, with us kind of wrapping up on time here, I got one quick question for you, and then I'll let Sean kind of finish it off. But where do you see yourself in 10, 15 years? Do you like where you're at? Do you want to keep being a strength and conditioning coach? Do you want to move maybe into the private sector? Like Sean's in the private sector now. Where do you see yourself in 10, 15 years?
I would say right now, with where I'm at right now in my life and with my family and stuff, I really see myself being at Shippensburg for quite some time. Like I've grown to love the area. I feel a lot of support from our administration in the athletic department. Within our athletic department, I sense my value in the way that I'm allowed to kind of maneuver and do things. And I can really see my family growing up, like my son growing up here. We have another kid on the way. So kind of planting my roots here. But I will say, I don't necessarily know if I'll be the head strength coach. My goal is in 10 to 15 years to have developed myself to an associate director position, where I'm the associate director of sports performance. And then I have a head strength coach underneath me that is the head guy, and I might have a sport or two that I'm dealing with, but then that head person kind of runs their show and runs their deal, and to kind of developing a whole sports performance staffing here at Shippensburg. That would be the long-term goal, I think. A little bit more administrative and a little less hands-on coaching, because coaching for 12 hours a day for the next 15 years is going to wear thin on me.
It does definitely take a toll on you. Not that you lose any passion for it, but like, it's just like any job. It's going to wear on you. It's going to wear on your mind. It's going to wear on your body. But that's a good thing as well, because it conditions you to be an educator, it conditions you to be a coach. And it sounds like, from everything that I've just listened to, it sounds like the coaches that are underneath you right now are set up for an amazing mentor. And the athletes underneath you right now are set up for a great time at Shippensburg learning from you. But yeah, that's just, you're killing it out there, man. I'm proud to call you one of my former interns.
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate it, man. And like I was saying earlier, yeah, you were there during the formative years of me turning into a strength coach and going from a meathead football player that thought he knew what he was doing to actually like learning the process. And I've done a lot of learning since being with you, man, but you were definitely there to kind of help guide the way. And I've always appreciated, and I've always, I no longer look at you as a mentor anymore. You're a friend now, and you're somebody that I've grown to appreciate and really just kind of continue to learn from. You're still a mentor in some ways, but I'm glad that I can call you friend now. And Will, I appreciate you and everything you've been saying, and I would love to continue building a relationship with you as well.
For sure.
My big spiel when I talk to our student athletes that are recruits is I'm excited. I'm excited to see you squat big PRs and doing all that stuff. But at the end of the day, I wanna build a relationship, because playing days are gonna come to a close, and I want to be at least one shining light when you look back on your life that helped you got to the success you see now. And so building a relationship with you guys, continuing a relationship with you, Coach Sean, and building a relationship with you, Will, is something I look forward to doing.
Appreciate your time,
sure,
man. Last 10 seconds, give me a 10-second shot. Who should we have next on this podcast?
Me? Oh, shoot. Coach Day at RMU.
Yes,
All
sir.
right.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dennis, for the time. We appreciate it, brother.
Yeah, man.
Thanks, dude. Appreciate it. Good to meet you, man.
And good to meet you as well.